Halestorm are back from the dead here on Music Talk with an album that features more screams, more solos, more extremes. Here is Lzzy Hale to tell us what it was like to come back from the dead.
Back from the dead? Is
Yep.
that kind of how it feels?
Pretty much. Yeah, it's definitely it's definitely a war cry of survival. But we're so excited about finally releasing new music, and I don't know whether or not I'll get a little emotional when I buy it for the first time out in public, but every time I start talking about it, I get a little misty. So there may be some of that.
Fair enough.
Much more connected with my emotions after all that we've gone through the past couple of years. So.
Well, good. Well, I wanted to talk to you about that, what it was like for you. I've read a little bit about it, but I wanted to hear it from you. What you had to kind of go through, because you're releasing records, you're on the road all the time, and suddenly everything's done, and you're back home.
Yeah, I know, and it's hilarious because there were so many firsts. So many long periods of time that things that I've never done before, like. Since I've been in this band since I was 13. So it had been the longest I've ever gone without a show. The longest I've ever gone without the camaraderie of my bandmates, without seeing people. And the longest I've ever been in my house, right. It's kind of strange. But yeah, I mean, it started out like with everything. This is probably a blessing in disguise. We'll get a little break from everything. And then, when all of a sudden people started really struggling with their jobs, and, we were trying to put some stuff together for all of our crew that were out of work. And then, there was no plan in sight for the foreseeable future. Are we actually getting in the studio? Are all of our dates have gotten canceled? You just start looking at life in a different way. You start asking yourself who you are without all of those things. And what I don't think I realized as a whole, because I've been doing this, my whole life. 2022 marks 25 years since our first show as Halestorm. So I've been in this band longer than I haven't been. And right. I don't think I realized how many of those weapons, I use to combat certain things in my head, maybe some, my self-doubt, depression, anxiety, a lovely alphabet soup of things in my head.
Sure. Yeah.
That I, don't deal with as a normal person, and I use the live show. I use, having this mission, this band is an extension of me. So again, like I said, when all of that halted, I had to look at myself in a different way, understand who I am without it. And it was a little scary because I'm no longer the Lzzy Hale on stage, the rock star. I am now a Elizabeth May Hale the Fourth in my pajamas on the couch for 3 days, wondering what my future holds. And I suppose some of the silver lining that came out of writing this record was I definitely rediscovered the why I need to write versus loving to write. It was literally the only weapon I had left in that toolbox to combat, some of the things that were going on in my head. And in turn, this would have been a very different record if the world had remained the same. And I feel like I got to face some of those things head on through writing this record. So that's the power of music for you.
So was the writing process different for you because of the circumstances? When you sat down, what was the process like?
Absolutely. I mean, from everything to, the fact that we really had to change kind of everything about it. For myself, started writing these songs just for the sake of writing because we didn't really have a plan. And I found myself in a very good way, you're not writing specifically for your fan base. You're not writing for radio. You're not writing because you have a label breathing down your neck. You're writing just for you. And so I started realizing the importance of writing from a very, from a true perspective and not just so that we can get back out on tour and do these things live. And in turn, it actually, now that I listen to the record, it kind of made it more universal because you realize through that writing process that you weren't alone in any of those feelings. But as far as the the journey to finally get into the studio, it began as kind of a relay sport. I would come up with some ideas and I would, toss the baton to my guitar player, Joe, and he would write some stuff on top of it, or vice versa. I'd get some ideas from my guys. But usually, when we start actually developing, our stuff to get into the studio, we all jam together, we all get together. So the fact that we really weren't doing that was very strange. And then even when we finally got into the studio together, we got all masked up and we kept the bubble tight and nobody went anywhere but from studio to home. And so that was a, reunion of sorts, finally, kind of getting together and jamming on some of these things. And I always tell people we were quite irresponsible because we had the songs that we knew we needed to work on. But then we ended up with, I think, a whole album's worth full of B-sides that are just really strange, experimental songs, because we just were so happy to be together again. So that felt good. And then even the writing process, we ended up basically building the pyramid upside down. I ended up doing all of the vocal takes to the demos. And then we ended up taking them into the studio and building the tracks around these vocal takes. So it ended up giving it a very interesting perspective because usually it's the other way around. We build up the track, not the last one to get in. So you can really hear, the influence that maybe my vocal takes ended up having on the musical end versus the other way around. So it was just a very interesting way to do it. But again, silver linings with the way that the world was working. It kind of forces you to be creative. And I mean, I suppose one of the lessons that I learned through all of this is that I probably wouldn't be a musician if I didn't know how to, pivot and, to do things in a different way. And you know what? It's never the same way either. We always approach it like, okay, we're going to do it like we did the last record. Then of course the world is like, nope.
Right. Well, and considering your vocals, you were off the road for a while. So I don't know if that had any effect on the physicality of actually singing, and B, mentally, where are you at when you're doing these performances, especially since you're doing it to demos instead of finished tracks?
Oh my goodness. You kind of have to, for me, it was kind of a relief because we were doing things and this was me really getting a chance to perform, not just record, because I hadn't performed in a while. So I feel like a lot of that was, the studio was my replacement for that performance that I was kind of needing and craving. And this, again, had to put it somewhere. So if the album's a little angsty, it was the only outlet I could use a little bit. Had to put it somewhere. Couldn't lay it out on stage. But it's interesting the mentality that goes into that too, because I was very confident vocally as well, because I had continued one of the things that I did manage to do during lockdown was, continue to train and continue to develop things that, maybe I hadn't had the time before, because we're always on tour. So every time that we're off tour, I'm like, okay, just rest, don't sing, don't do things. And now it's like, I'll just do all the things. And so I really wanted to kind of really show that spectrum in my vocals, but, and spectrum in the songwriting. And I think that unconsciously, all of us went into the studio thinking, well, if we never get to play these out live, if the world just doesn't get back to it, and this is our only outlet, everyone's going to be on 11. We are going to leave no stone unturned, and go big or go home. In the words of our producer Nick Raskulin, it's we need this to be we have an opportunity to have this be the most Halestorm-iest record ever. So really, I mean, that was the beautiful thing too. It's like everybody in their individual strengths, everybody showed up. Nobody called anything in. We all just really wanted to be there.
Cool. Now we've seen and heard a song called "The Steeple." There's a video to it and whatever, and that has, it's full on, but it's also lyrically it feels kind of inclusive as well. Is that kind of the idea behind that too? Was that one of the first ones that?
Absolutely. That was, really, that one came shortly after Back from the Dead, where that was kind of like the one that broke the dam. All of a sudden, like the flood started and things started we started holding ourselves to really just a higher standard, because we wanted everything to be just as dynamic and as intense as as Back in the Dead. But with the Steeple, I mean, yes, there is a huge element to this that is quite literally me trying to create that communion and that fellowship that you feel, when you're at a show. At the same time, there is that internal display of that feeling that happens internally when that cloud is lifted. And in a lot of ways, music is the grand source of that relief. But I remember us just really feeling that as soon as we started really, getting into really recording these songs. And there was still a lot of bad news every day, but we felt some kind of hope, so hence the first line, "It stopped raining in my head today, and I finally feel like myself again," finding your place and understanding how different, that attitude toward the world can be depending on what's going on in your head. So there is a mental health element to that song, as well as many others on this album. But,
Right.
but yeah, I mean, the beautiful thing about both our first singles is that we've been out on 2 major tours since everything kind of opened back up. And there are people that have lines from both the Steeple and Back in the Dead already tattooed on them. And the album hasn't even come out yet. So I'm like, I guess everybody just, like I said, everyone's just, let's go big or go home. Nobody's holding anything back, including the tattooists. So
good on you. So it begins with Back from the Dead, ends with a tune called Raise Your Horns. And so I'm wondering, was there a plan in place when you're making the playlist? And Raise Your Horns, as I've heard, and I was hoping you might comment on that.
Oh, of course. Well, my guitar player Joe and I were quite obsessed with the sequence for this album. We wanted to, really, I guess we've been talking quite a lot about how it is still kind of an old school mentality to actually put together an album and not just release singles. But that was, it's always been a passion of ours to really take, the listener on a journey and on a ride, and and not just throw some bangers out there. So I mean, it's both a journey musically, but also lyrically, it kind of plays into in real time what the roller coaster ride that we were going through. And so, with Raise Your Horns, that was kind of always in the back of our heads as a good way to end the album. And it's funny, I just literally discovered this morning, because I don't think I've ever actually looked up the meaning of the phrase "raise your horns." There's an actual meaning for it besides metal and it literally means to exalt oneself, which I feel like subconsciously I knew that, because that's the way I'm using that. But it was kind of funny how that worked out, but this song for me is definitely touches on the mental health, but it's a message of self-love and of acceptance of everything about yourself, about both your dark and light, and realizing that you can't necessarily love somebody else unless you fill that cup for yourself. And that acceptance of everything that you are, and that raising of your horns. Now, the funniest thing about that song is that I'm sure a lot of people will be looking at the title and thinking, "Oh, this is going to be banger of a song," because I can see it. Which was really, just a silly idea I had during lockdown. I was talking with the guys because we would kind of FaceTime, and I'm like, "Guys, I have this idea. I want to write a song called Raise Your Horns, but talk about the actual, what it means to me." And guess what? It's not going to have any guitar, no drums, and I'm not going to do any screaming in it, And so, it's one of those things that I love the juxtaposition. That is that is my Alice Cooper influence kind of showing its humor.
Right.
But,
cool. You do get plenty of screaming in on Psycho Crazy, which is a track just before.
That is true. Well, if I'm going to give you this side of me, I got to go the other side too. That's me being selfish as a singer. Right. But yeah, I don't know. It's I had been developing some of that white noise scream technique kind of on the road, for the past couple of years. Had never really delved in. I did it maybe a little bit. There was a touch of some background vocal things that I did on the last album, but never really featuring it. And so it was kind of funny to be recording these songs, and even especially in Psycho Crazy or Wicked Ways, the guys in my band would listen to these tracks that I was sending in, and they were like, "Are you okay? Like, you're an animal. I haven't heard you do that." So it's kind of nice to surprise guys that have known you, you know, probably better than your own family does. So.
Yep. So you've been doing some shows. What's it been like back on stage in front of people?
Oh, it's wonderful. You just feel like you're at home. It's also different now, in a good way. I feel like some of the things that we normally would be like paying too much attention to, like, oh, did I hit that note, or did I, those normal discussions that usually happen like after a show, it's like, oh, you were too fast with these tempos, or maybe I was flat on this note or something. We're not talking about that anymore. We're just so caught up in the middle of the moment, and just like trying to live in the present and live in the now. And then after the show, we're just so happy to be able to say that we can still do this and that we're here. So, and I've noticed that with the audience too. The audience is literally coming to a show like it's going to be stolen from them again. So it's right. Just, I don't know, it's a beautiful time. And I've also noticed a huge drop off in people using their phones on,
oh, really?
Like, as far as like just not paying attention. Everyone just wants to see everything and absorb it. So I don't know. I hope that's a trend that continues on, because it's good to see everyone's faces, not
Well, let's face it. For the last couple of years, everybody's just been doing nothing but staring at their phones.
I was going to say they probably need a break.
That's excellent. So what are you going to do on the 6th when the record comes out?
Well, as is tradition, we usually go out to a couple local record stores and try to buy the album,
right.
for luck, as is tradition. And it's funny because, like I said before, I keep thinking about buying it, and I'm like, am I going to get emotional? I might, but it's just going to be fun. It's going to feel so good to just finally get it out there, because we've been waiting for so long to put out new music, and then you finally get it done. We got everything mixed and mastered and sent in December. And then now finally, in the immortal words of Tom Petty, the waiting is indeed the hardest part.
Yes, indeed. All righty. Well, hopefully you'll make your way back down to New Zealand in the near future.
Absolutely.
We're opening things up.
We're planning on it. Like I said, fingers crossed. We were just talking about that with our booking team. Make sure we get over there real soon. I miss all you guys, and thank you so much, not only to you, but thank you so much to everybody that has been coming to the shows every time we come down there. Thank you for not forgetting all about us. And I hear from so many of you online, and especially during the entire lockdown, you guys were just a light in the dark to me. So I appreciate it.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for spending time with me. Good luck with everything,
Marty.
And we hope to see you soon.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you so much, Marty. Good to see you again.
You too. Bye-bye.